Hi, welcome to my video. I'm Pauline. I talk mostly about spirit guides, spirits, and trauma. Trauma and excitement, actually. Being a nurse of over 36 plus years in intensive care and trauma, I've definitely seen things that most of you can only imagine. And with that, we're going to proceed, and I hope you find this comforting. It was many years ago when I began work, and the first building I worked in, I knew it was haunted. There's no doubt about it. It was so old. I remember sitting with a lady with the plaster coming off the walls around her, and I let them know that this room alone needed to be repaired. However, their answer was, we're going to repair it all here pretty soon. And unfortunately, the building would be taken down and a new one would be built eventually, which was wonderful, I thought. So as I traveled from coast to coast to emergency rooms and picking up bits of information and working with the patients, patients were always amazing. It didn't matter what kind of patient, rich or poor, or if they were street bound, all was good. I remember one intensive care that was pretty good, and I walked into it and found out that a young fella had overdosed at a club. We were picking him up there from the club, bringing him forward to us, and the doctors just thought it was one of those things that, you know, you're out drinking, and it was a big city, so for them this was a pretty common problem out there. So I listened to the story, and while the police were actually talking with the doctor, and I turned around and began talking to the friend, and I said, can you tell me what happened? Like, this boy was probably about 6'3", university, very pleasant, had no problems at all. And he said, we were out drinking, we wanted to go to the bar, so we did. And he said something happened. Don't know what it was, but he said all of a sudden he collapsed on the floor, so I called 911. They came and got him. After doing his labs, we found, yes, there was cocaine and meth in his drinks, obviously, but he said he would never do that. And I said, okay, let's work on this. So anyway, I got some family ahead and we discussed it, and they said their son would never. He was in his master's degree and working with that. And I began wondering, like, what actually has happened out here? This was a big city that I had never expected to reach. But the jobs were good and there was a lot going on out there. So I thought, okay, we'll work with what they have. So as I began talking to the family, I found out that, nope, he has never done drugs. That's one thing he was wide against. He just could not do them. And because of receiving his bachelor's and then on to his master's, study was his big thing. So I began, as he began to rally in the days ahead, the doctors were like, his heart's blown, we're putting on special machines. He went on life support. And I thought, oh, why? Like, why did this have to happen to this child? So I pleaded my case to the doctors and said, this boy does not fit the routine of a regular drug addict. There's nothing about him at all. So we went back and forth, contacted a few more specialists who came in to see him. And by the grace of God, they actually decided now to put him on the transplant list for a heart. Now, had he have been a person on the street, he wasn't going to get a heart, not at all. But the family had convinced me that this boy went to the club, and when he was up dancing and turned his back to his drink, sure enough, he was peppered with something. And it unfortunately, some of these drugs do increase your heart rate, and they almost allow your heart to explode. They go so fast. And sure enough, we put him on the waiting list. It took approximately 2 months to receive that. to receive the, receive the new heart. And because accidents are so prone out there, we do have a lot of organ donations. Which came to then, I was beginning to be a little bit more skeptical about what are we dealing with out here? What's really happening? And can I actually help them? And again, it was just one of those things where you start to build a lot of empathy towards people as you get to know them all. And before long, I had mostly been gifted the trauma bay, which is anything coming in that's not a cold or little chest ache, you're going to receive them. But when it's slow, you're going to work outside with the regular person. And here's where I met another young fella, probably 20. And I thought, what happened to you? Like, his face was just unbelievable. And he was cut up and bad. As I spoke to him, I asked, like, what happened? He was only coming in for a small cut, but needed a tetanus shot. But I asked him, like, what's wrong with your face? Like, what had happened? And he said, well, I was here a few years ago. And he said, the sad story is, there's just my mom, my sister and I, and my dad had left. And he said, I bought a used car. And out here, we don't have to have any inspections or things that you guys do out there where I lived. So I said, oh, okay. So we discussed a little bit more, and I said, what kind of help did you get? And he said, not much. He said, they just patched me up and kind of put me back on the street and said it was all my fault. So I talked to him for a while. It wasn't that busy that I couldn't afford to spend some time. And come to find out, this young fella worked 2 jobs, plus went to school, and he ended up buying a car to be able to go back and forth to school and work on time to support his mother and his sister and himself. And because the vehicles don't have to be inspected every year like some provinces, it became pretty clear that somebody was in the wrong. It had had major defaults that would have been pulled off the road. His head went through the windshield, and most of the glass was embedded still into this child's face. So I couldn't believe what had happened, and I couldn't believe that nobody really took a care what happened to the child. So I asked him, I said, would you be able to see somebody if I could find someone about your face? And this was all in the same day. And he said, I could, but I can't afford anything. And I said, well, no, we're going to see. I'll see. I said, I'm going to talk to somebody. So I went over and made a phone call. 2 or 3 of them, actually. And I explained my case to another plastic surgeon who was a couple miles away. Well, not a couple. He was like into the next city. And I explained my problem to him and what had happened to this child, who still had a lot of years left because he was probably 21 then. And he said, okay, I'll take a look. And I said, but he has no, Medicare, he's got nothing, no insurance, and most doctors won't even look at him. And he said, no, I will look, and I will see what the chances are of me doing it as a freebie. He said the consult will be free, but depends on how much surgery. So I let the boy know, wrote down the name, the address, phone number, gave him his appointment. It was probably 6 weeks later that the plastic surgeon called me in the trauma room and said, Pauline, I have your boy here. I've seen him, and I just wanted you to know, because there's so much glass embedded in his face and head, neck, and upper arms, I'm going to do him free in the operating room and try to prepare his face much better than all the surgery or quick surgeries they did for him to stitch him up. I was more than elated to find out that I actually got this guy some help. Nobody bothered, like everything else. Time goes so quickly and you just want to get them in, you want to get them out, and you just, bye, see you later. But my thing was not that. It was, if I can help you, I'm going to help you. That's was my God-given right there. Which is why, I set out to help people get what they could. So anyway, he went on his merry way, came back to see me probably 8 months later, maybe. And he did have his face done. A big hug came, and he really appreciated everything that I could do for him. And I just felt so blessed because now I knew that his face didn't itch, it didn't hurt. All where the glass had been embedded was relieved. And I'm just so happy with that, and I'm really appreciative of the doctor that actually took him on. Another fellow I met in the emergency room, again, not trauma, but he was a chest painer, a chronic chest painer, and nobody wanted to see him. And it was like, oh my God, there comes Charles again. And I was like, what's wrong with Charles? And I was told, oh, he's chronic chest pain. Okay, for me, it's like, wait right there. The guy's 68, he's got chronic chest pain. And you're treating him like a piece of wood, basically? I said, I'll see Charles. I'll take him this time. So they said, fill your boots. So I did. I went over and I spent my time with Charles. And I said, Charles, how you doing, honey? I'm Pauline. And I said, I'm going to be your nurse today. And he said, oh, I just need some morphine for the chest pain and some nitro. And I said, okay, we got that. I'm going to give it to you. So as I was giving him these things, I looked at him and something just broke my heart right there. And I thought, why are you not getting the care you need? Why are you not being loved in this room compared to a 2-year-old with a cold? So anyway, I said, look, anytime I'm on, you see me. Okay? I said, I'm going to help you. I'll get you what you need, and I have no questions about it. And he said, are you sure? Because he said, they passed me from everybody. I've seen everybody. The doctor said, okay. I said, I don't care. I do care. And I said, we're going to help you out. So anyway, from there on in, usually once or twice a week, he would come through with the ambulance. And it was like, Charles, I said, great, put him on bed X. I'll see him in a few minutes. So I'd quickly get to him as quick as I could, put him on the monitor, get the blood works done, and then I would say, Charles, how are you feeling? How bad's the pain? And he would tell me, how bad it was. And I said, okay, we're going to get you something for that. Not a downward look, not being nasty, and he appreciated it. And eventually, over the year, we became really good kind of buddies. It was like, is Pauline here? Yep, come on in. And he would come. And I would just give him what he needed, make sure he was pain-free. And unfortunately, after a bit, I took 2 weeks vacation. When I came back, I hadn't seen Charles for 2 or 3 weeks, and I wondered what happened. So I said, did my buddy Charles die or anything? Does anybody know what happened to him? And they said, no, he just hasn't been around, I guess. We haven't seen him for a couple of weeks. And I thought, well, now that's kind of odd, isn't it? So I asked around again to all the other nurses and docs, and they were like, no, haven't really seen him. Hasn't shown up for anything. Must be doing okay. It wasn't too long after that. He came in miserable, just miserable with the ambulance. And I thought, what is going on? So I asked the crew, I said, has he not called you guys? I mean, basically it's the same people that bring us, these people. And they were like, no, he stayed home with it, he said. I said, why? And he said, apparently somebody gave him a hard time when he came in and really ragged him out. I'm like, say what? I said, I was only off for 2 weeks. I said, how could that happen? And they said it did, and he was afraid to come. I rushed right to his bedside, and I said, Charles, I was on vacation, honey. I said, I should have probably let you know, but I said, still, you had no reason not to come. I said, you are a chest patient. You are a cardiac person. Don't ever, ever be afraid to come here. And after I got him settled and watched him cry for a minute, and he was so grateful I was back, I thought, this is going to stop. This type of treatment in an emergency room is going to stop. And he wasn't the only one I saw like this. There were many people that had told me that they had been given a hard time for something here or there. And I was like, why? It's because you're older? Is it because you have chronic disease? Kidney failure? I mean, I don't know. But I know while I'm on duty, that's not going to be a problem. So anyway, sure enough, I had to have a little chat with everybody and say, no, I'm not used to working that way. I worked in a Catholic hospital before in the intensive care, and man, I'll tell you, it was run very well. And people got the care they need. There wasn't ifs, ands, or buts. It didn't matter if they were the alcoholic. It didn't matter if they were the drug addicted. It didn't matter that they had a blanket on the street to sleep in. They were treated the best that we could give. And I've grown up that way. So no, that doesn't fly for me. After the fact, I began to wonder how many more people were like that. How many more people had stories to tell me that they needed it. They needed help. They needed love and guidance. And we came up with kind of a pattern for him because he was not a bypass candidate for surgery. And we couldn't do anything with his valves or his arteries. The best we could do is give him the time, respectfully, that he required. And he did require it. It wasn't more than a year and a half prior to coming to the next coast that Charles did pass away, and peacefully in the emergency room with me. And I'm very grateful for having met him and spent time with him. And it's very sad when we think of those things, that we're going to spend a lot of time with people. But when you learn, everybody's human. Everybody requires the same attention. It doesn't matter if they're nasty. It doesn't matter who they are. Attention should be given. And that's the priority. And are we short-staffed? Guys, this happens all the time. This is as old as history. I mean, when I started the nursing profession over 35 years ago, we were using nurses from England and Scotland that were shipped over to give us a hand. I mean, this shortage is always the same. So I say, to everyone, whether it's your mother, your father, an aunt or an uncle, whether it's your patient or someone else's patient, be kind. I mean, we don't know the years they have. We don't know the moments that they have. But we sure need to look after them. If you like my channel, please subscribe and hit the like button. Thank you.